I first had an idea that something was wrong in 2018 when I was training alongside another female athlete, and I kept telling her like, oh, I'm really struggling with like this period pain, or like I'm back on my period, or something along the lines of that. And she kept telling me that, you know what, that actually isn't normal, that shouldn't be happening. And she told me that like the females she grew up with and the females that she have in her life don't have those issues, and she specifically didn't have those issues anyway. So she did say that like, this isn't normal, you shouldn't be having these issues, and you should probably go and get to see a doctor. But it wasn't until probably 2019 where I was actually diagnosed that I was actually sent to a specialist and informed of everything that was going on in my body. It made me actually happy, which is really strange, but throughout my whole career, which is coming up on 8 years now, I was always told that your pain isn't real, and your pain is something that you're using to get attention with. It's all in your head. And I was even told that in primary school when I got my period, when I was in end of grade 4, beginning of grade 5, at 9 or 10 years of age. I was told by my own school principal that, you know, it wasn't real, and you're just trying to get home, you're just trying to leave school and just not do schoolwork. Whereas like I was actually in a sick bay, you know, crippled over, always having to call mum to come get me from home because I was always so sick. And you know, she saw that, and she obviously couldn't really tell off a principal because that's just not really spot on. But going into surgery, I was absolutely petrified that they weren't going to find anything, and all these people that were telling me that there's nothing wrong with me was actually true. And so I was petrified, mum was petrified. Obviously you don't want to see your kid go into surgery ever, and then going in for, you know, what became a string of surgeries for the past 4 or 5 years. We were both just really nervous. And so I remember waking up in the recovery room, bawling my eyes out of just pure panic and like just nervousness. And the first thing the nurses asked me was like, oh, how was I feeling, all this stuff. And I just ignored them. I was like, did he find it? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, did he find the stuff in my gut or not? And they were like, yeah, he found a lot of it, and you have 3 incisions. And I just remember like crying even more because I was just so relieved that I wasn't actually insane, and it was actually validated that I had, you know, a chronic issue. And even the week beforehand when I met my surgeon and my specialist that I still see now, he validated me straight away. He's like, yep, I reckon this is pretty much 95% certain what you've got. And he was right. He knew what he was talking about, and he was right.
And it was quite emotional thing, hey, when you woke up and realized that she was crying not because she you know, she had it. She was crying more that just to prove that there wasn't something wrong with her, you know, mentally, and that there was actually something there. And it's quite sad to see your child crying with happiness that she's actually got endometriosis instead of being sad that she's got endometriosis.
Yeah, like I came into the room, he ended up asking me to stay overnight because he knew the emotional and mental strain it would have taken on my body. Obviously being told I don't have anything wrong with me, and then finding out you know you have endometriosis, which isn't a lovely thing to be diagnosed with. And I was being wheeled into my room, and mum was walking at the same time, and we look at each other, and then we just like burst into tears and just start laughing at each other because we're both crying like an ugly mess. But then we also realized that we were relieved that there was actually something wrong with me, because now we know what it was, and then we could figure out how to treat it later on. I think the most challenging thing about having endometriosis, about like going about your daily life, is that it's constant pain, it's constant flow, it's constant everything for me personally. And I think the hardest thing for myself was trying not to like dwell on it and try not to let it affect my everyday life. But you know, it's simple things of having to sit down every 5 minutes at a shopping centre because you can't actually walk that far without being in that much agony. And then, you know, trying not to walk over with like in a little ball to try and comfort yourself. But one of the harder things about, you know, this chronic illness is that the pain that I was feeling out of the water would be worse when I got in the water. Nothing would really settle it while I was training. There's nothing that I could do to make it chill out a little bit just so I could train for 2 hours. You know, if I could have done anything to make it settle for 2 hours and then take the extra pain afterwards, I would have, but there was nothing I really could have done for that. So trying to manage the pain while swimming, and then trying to manage my extremely heavy flows that just didn't seem to end was just crazy, because, you know, I'd have to get out, sorry for like the graphicness, but I'd have to get out the pool and change tampon halfway through the session, because, you know, there's just too much flow and there was nothing that would stop it. There was nothing stopping it. And the thing that's even worse about swimming is that my flow would increase when I was training. So I'd have a heavy flow out the water and be struggling with that, and then I'd get in the water and just voluntarily go and make my flow even stronger for 2 hours while I was training. So I think that's like one of the hardest things, is trying to manage that.
And also, I think I used to watch her from, I mean, I was never there for during training sessions, but I know watching her at racing and at competitions, she'd get out the water and she would just collapse right there at the stairs. She wouldn't be able to pull herself out of the water. She'd be lying in a ball, have people, you know, people have to help her to get to, you know, off the pool decks, because she was in so much cramping, agony pain after a race. So, you know, you swim 50 meters and you can't walk afterwards. So it's something that was really difficult right at the beginning, I think, but you've learned how to manage that. So.
Yeah, I've learned how to manage it, and it's also a really annoying thing, because like I want to be able to swim as many events as I can in swimming, but I can't do butterfly. No way. Using my stomach muscles just brings on cramping. I can't do core work in the gym. I can't do butterfly, which I really wish I could, even though it's like a tough stroke to do. It'd be a fun event to race, and so would 200 medley, but I can't do that.
No,
because
the
of
strain on your stomach, it just flares the endo.
I was able to manage my symptoms in my elite career thanks to my specialist. Like, I couldn't have done it without him. I was suffering before I met him, and I was still suffering when I was, you know, when I'm being treated by him, but it's definitely at like a lower cost than what I was beforehand. So
Yeah.
if I couldn't have him as my specialist, I think the past 4 or 5 years since having that diagnosis and being treated with it would have been a whole different story. So I think thanks to him, with all his treatment plans and his flexibility with those treatment plans, because the amount of treatment plans we've looked at and we've gone through, I think
crazy.
If we could give like $1 for how many things we've had to go through, we'd be quite rich for it right now. And his flexibility of, you know, switching in between 2 things just so we can try and treat it a different way and attack it better, so I could get through the next competition, and we'd come back after that main competition, that international competition, and talk about it and be like, okay, what's our next plan of action? And I think it's also his flexibility of, you know, we both have his phone number, and if I can't text him because I'm overseas, I'll text mum and she'll shoot him a message, and it's like a little train of communication, and they'd send medications over to me overseas if I was struggling, and vice versa. Like, he'd just send me an e-script and I'd go to the pharmacy down the road. I'd be set for the next couple of days. So I think his flexibility of being a person with us, not just a specialist, but also the control that he let me take. If I needed to have an endometriosis laparoscopy surgery to have a clean out so I could make it to the next competition, it'd be on my time. It wouldn't be on his time. I remember giving him a window of a week of being like, okay, you pick a day. I need it between this date and this date so I can have this time off to be back in the water by this date. And the amount of times he's done that for me is absolutely phenomenal. And back to what I said before, without him, I couldn't have actually done any of these results without his support and without his flexibility. And I don't think he realizes the amount of support he gave me, because we actually made a plaque of one of my Com Games caps, and we had a photo together with all my medals after the year, and I gave it to him. He just started bawling in the doctor's in his rooms in the hospital, and all 3 of us were just there crying, being like, what an emotional journey. And he's like, but I didn't help at all. And I was like, you are full of it, because you helped in more ways than you can even count.
Yeah.